Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or good day wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the next episode of No Dice, No Glory. Sponsored by our jobs that actually pay us money, we're coming to you not at all live from an abandoned arms factory deep under a mountain in West Virginia. We are proud to proffer to you the finest in wargaming coverage. Without any further ado, let's get this show on the road.
Welcome to Tales of the Sale. We are a No Dice, No Glory podcast about Firelock Games, Blood and Plunder, which is something that all of us are super excited to play. And we have been recording episodes pretty regularly. When this is recorded will remain a mystery. For those of you who are listening to this far after we've recorded it, where it's being recorded are from secure, undisclosed bunkers. And there are three people here on the podcast today that we'll introduce you to. The first is Glenn Van Meter. Say hi, Glenn.
Hey there, everybody.
Second is Tyler Stone. Say hi, Tyler.
Hello all.
And I am Tom Mullane. I think I've been the longest tenured writer at NDAG, and I think I roped you guys. I roped Glenn into it, but I think Mitch roped Tyler into it. Is that right? Or
I think we did
Mitch
Tyler as a
came
guest never left.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, well, we like guests that never leave. You can't really outstay your welcome at No Dice, No Glory. As long as you keep writing articles, we're just going to keep you around. And Tyler's got both of his beat in terms of writing articles, and his articles are better and more historically interesting than mine, which is deeply humbling for me to say because I'm supposed to be the history major here, and I'm just ashamed of myself. So today we're going to talk about the game, and this is a podcast specifically geared to beginners. So we're going to start off by talking to you about how we got introduced to the game, to Blood and Plunder, and to Firelock in general. We're going to talk about how to get started in Blood and Plunder, the basics of what you need, different forces you might pick. We'll talk about list building. We'll talk about, do you need a boat? My answer obviously is yes. You need to buy more stuff, so buy the boat. And then we'll talk about other resources and places you can reach out to kind of learn more about the game if you're somebody who's just getting themselves started and getting your feet wet. So I'm going to let Tyler introduce himself first and just have him talk a little bit about how you got started in the game, because I think you're the longest tenured Blood and Plunder player.
I didn't get in on the ground level. I came in December of 2017. I asked the family and girlfriend and everybody for Blood and Plunder stuff for Christmas. I had seen the game, I think, on the on-tabletop stuff is how I discovered the game. I was looking for something to replace some other gaming that I did. It was actually kind of funny because I saw it. My girlfriend saw the tables and was like, ooh, if you build something like that, I'll play it with you. So that's how I got roped into doing the terrain that I do as well.
I have a question for you, Tyler, because you have like pirate kit that you wear, right? Like you.
Yes.
So like, was this always a historical interest you had, or did the game really spark that?
It was always an interest that I've had. I lived in North Carolina for a little while, so like Blackbeard country. But it's something I've always been at least passingly interested in. And then with this game, it sort of gave me a place to start as far as really digging in past all of the Hollywood and like common myth that we get. And that's where a lot of the history came from. The sailing stuff comes from, again, just kind of growing up on the coast, and my dad can sail. So figured that out relatively easily. Sails go the wrong way on these because they go, side to side. They're all square rigged. But yeah, that was something I'd been interested in. And then the game is historically accurate and puts a lot of emphasis on being so. So I was able to use that as a jumping off point. And through that, I've gotten to talk with Bennerson Little, who's done all kinds of historical advising for pretty much anything that's got pirates in it that you enjoy, Black Sails, things like that, and did the advising for this game. So that's been a pretty cool opportunity, along with other things that I've gotten to do, the conventions and all those things.
So Tyler's our resident historian and playtester and stuff, and Glenn would be our farmer. Now, we'll warn before I turn it over to Glenn that I'm concerned that his new son has mental powers that are interfering with Discord, which is what we're recording this on. So if Glenn suddenly cuts out randomly, I'm blaming his son. So Glenn, talk to us about how you got into Blood and Plunder.
I think that's fair, to be honest. Well, I got into Blood and Plunder because I was at a convention. I was busy doing a different tournament, also for 17th century stuff, by Fire and Sword. And my buddies were tired of me taking all day to play this tournament, and they hopped in on some naval game called Blood and Plunder, where they were pushing pirate ships around and shooting each other. And when my tournament finished up, I wandered over. I was introduced to Tyler, who ran me through the rules. And they were running a tournament, but anybody could just jump in. So I managed to jump in, beat him on the first round that I played. I was then put up against the guy who was in the lead. I managed to beat him. And I accidentally won the tournament on a game I hadn't tried before. So it was a small tournament, to be fair. And but I fell in love because in between rounds 1 and 2, I think I walked over to the vendor booth and bought my first starter set, along with my buddies. So,
And this tournament was a Mitch Reed special, so I think Mitch helped to rope you into it.
Oh yeah, that too. I unfortunately already knew Mitch Reed, and he dragged us into that.
Mitch Reed, just to kind of have this aside so I can make fun of him while he's recording this podcast to see if he's actually listening to it. Mitch Reed is somebody who both inspires me in terms of like restoring my faith in the military as an institution, and also horrifies me in the military as an institution, all at the same time, because Mitch has got a terrible, terrible, dirty mouth. And yet he's a brilliant gamer and designer of like simulations and stuff like that. So he's a fascinating guy to talk to. I'm really grateful that I got to meet him through gaming, and it's cool that he roped a bunch of us into all these Firelock stuff, because I think we're all kind of here in one way or another because he kind of put us in touch at one point.
Yep.
So yeah,
he's helped them develop a lot of their stuff, hasn't he? I know that he did their World War I game.
Yeah, he's worked on Blood and Valor. So he's worked on
I think he works more on that because Mitch's true love is Great War.
Oh, he loves Great War, yeah. And I do have the makings of an army for that, but I haven't put it together yet. But I will. And the rule set is nice and clean. It's a nice rule set, very similar to this one in a lot of respects. So jumping from one to the other is not difficult. So I'll say that.
How'd you get into it?
Yeah, I'll say that if Glenn is proof that anybody can pick it up and win if they have the requisite gamer skills, then I am proof of the opposite, that horrible play will not be fixed by lucky dice or anything else. So I first got into it because Mitch roped me into it, and he wanted me to help run a tournament, which I did. So I built some terrain, brought it with me, and learned the game in about 10 minutes. And then I was teaching people the game by the end of the day. And I had already run like 4 demos, and I couldn't get enough of it. So I spent all the hobby money I'd brought to Historicon on Firelock stuff, and we helped clean them out, I think.
Wait, was that last year when I started?
It was the con before, I believe. So like right before, I had bought a Dutch army and I had primed them, but I hadn't really started painting them yet. And I had bought all the books and I liked the books, but I hadn't gotten a chance to play the game because there's nobody near me that played.
Gotcha.
Which is still the case, but we're working on it. And we like it so much that we've devoted a significant chunk of our time to constantly discussing the game, to hosting Pate nights on a regular basis since the fall started. And we've gotten a chance to interview Mike Tunez and people at Firelock a bunch of times, and Tyler and I got to talk to Benderson Little. And yeah, so it's a great thing. It's a great part of the hobby, and we're psyched to be doing this. So I'll turn it over to Tyler to start, as somebody that kind of helped with like production and game design. Or actually, no, we'll do Glenn for this one. So Glenn, just talk about what do you need as the basics as a player. What should you pick up before you get started?
Okay, so since this is our kind of introduction episode, I could make a lot of presumptions that you have a background in historical gaming or any miniature gaming whatsoever, but I think that would be kind of off kilter there because many people are completely brand new to gaming when they see this. They see it, they love the ships, they love the models, and they want to play their first miniature game ever. So, the basics you'll need for Blood and Plunder, accepting the force that you will choose to start with, which we'll talk about later, you're going to need D10s, 10-sided dice. At least half a dozen. A dozen would be a good start. And then, like many gamers, you'll probably just keep collecting dice throughout your lifetime until you could be buried under a small mountain of them.
You can never have enough dice.
No, never enough. And some will be special to you, and some will, get destroyed or sacrificed to the dice gods. You will also need a measuring tape. Blood and Plunder is played in inches, although I'm sure some weird people probably converted that over to metric for their own enjoyment. Just because it's not terribly hard, given that they
Up
use
2 centimeters.
Can we pre-measure in this game?
We can.
Yes.
We can.
By the way, everything in this game pretty much revolves around 4 inches. So is it 4 inches or is it not?
Or increments thereof, right? Yeah.
Yes, increments thereof, which conveniently is about 10 centimeters. So if you do want to be weird and go to metric, you can. You also need cards. One of the beauties of the system is it can be played with a standard deck of playing cards. Now, Firelock does sell a beautiful sets of initiative cards with their own faction symbols on the back, and very conveniently they have the instructions saying veteran units get this many actions, trained units get this many actions, and inexperienced units get X many actions. But you don't need those. I have literally played with a cheap, $1 convenience store set of cards because I forgot to buy I forgot to bring an activation deck with me, and I had to run over to the gas station. So that is as ubiquitous as it gets. Beyond that, some nice terrain. Again, optional. You can use 2D terrain. You can use whatever you think is going to make your table look good. And basic wargamers, you can honestly start with, throw a green sheet on a table, put some books under it, you've got some hills, and, maybe a small box that looks like a house, that kind of stuff. It's very easy. Or if you're doing a naval game, flat blue cloth over a table, and you're pretty much done because it's the ocean. And of course, preferably an opponent, but that is optional because they have also released fairly decent solo rules, or you can just play yourself. That's less interesting.
And they've upgraded them, I believe. There's like 2.0 the solo rules to improve them.
Oh yeah, even better. Probably due to Tyler's feedback, because I know he was stuck playing himself for a while during the Great Shutdown.
Oh, I mean, I had Jen here and was able to play with her. So I actually tested the rules basically against someone who is very new to the game / has hardly played it at all, and tried to figure out if the AI could outplay that person. She beat me. And I was able to beat the AI, but they play pretty similarly. There's some times that the AI will do dumb things. Smart players should just override that, use the next option down. But that's kind of how AI is in any solo play game. Sometimes they're going to make decisions that just leave you scratching your head.
But
I would
ideally,
use
better judgment.
I was going to point out that Jen is a keeper, because if she's willing to play this game with you, it makes her a real rare find indeed.
Yeah, she's the one that got me dressing up like a pirate, so it's not all my fault.
That's
but again, you're probably not going to be playing yourself because you're going to want to go out and find a community. Again, something we'll talk about in a little bit.
So Tyler, since you've been helping design some of these, you've done some of the research on them, kind of walk us through what their options are if you're picking a force.
So at this point in the game, your options for picking forces are broken up across 2 books for the nationalities. So every force in the game, you're going to have a nationality. So French, English, Spanish, Dutch, and so on. And within those nationalities, you have sub-factions. They are working, as we record this, they're working on the Kickstarter for Raise the Black. When Raise the Black is out, since probably we'll still be linking back to this, when Raise the Black is out, there will be something like 100 sub-factions in the game across all of these nationalities. So everything that I say about a nationality, understand that you can modify that one way or the other with the sub-factions, and a lot of these nationalities can ally up and use each other's models and use each other's units. So if you like a unit in another faction, for example, the Dutch, if you're playing Spanish or English, you can probably grab a Dutch unit somehow. Having said that, the nationalities in the core game are the French, who are an elite kind of glass cannon unit. They have really good outbound skills. So they're really good at shooting at you. They're really good at punching you. They do not like being shot at or punched. And you're not usually going to have a very big list of them, not very many models of them in your list, because they have, boucanier and things like that, like elite snipers. The English, jack of all trades, bare average skills. You pretty much do it all. They'll do it all effectively. Their claim to fame is that they have a stiff upper lip and they're very steadfast. They have an incredible resolve trait that lets them hang in the fight whenever they're under fire. Spanish are a horde army, is what a lot of people calls them, but they are backed up by specialized units. So you're going to have a lot of cheap chaff, and then you're going to have like one unit of really hard hitters or a couple units of really hard hitters. Of course, you can always just go all specialized units and be kind of an elite army, unlike the French where they're elite and kind of do everything well. You're going to have one unit that can only stab people, lanceros, and you're going to have another unit that's pretty good at shooting. They can also do hit and run. They're kind of the guerrilla list of the core book. And lastly, out of the core book, you have unaligned, which are your pirates, privateers, and logwood cutters, so the logwood cutters can start the game drunk. That's always a big selling point for them.
Best rule in the game.
It really is.
Best rule ever. It really is. It's, if you're the defender, you can just get ambushed while you're 3 sheets. The other selling point is that they are the soup list. So just about everybody ends up playing unaligned at some point if you play more than one nationality, because they can just cherry pick all the best units from everybody else. The new pirates list coming from Raise the Black looks like it's going to be less cherry picking from everyone else. They'll still be able to do that. They're getting some new units that make them more of like an unruly mob kind of army.
I think to clarify, we should point out that Raise the Black does advance the game's timeline from the 17th century into the early 18th century, and we've changed ages from the Age of Buccaneers to the Age of Pirates, and that comes with a skill difference.
You end up with the horde. Yeah, that's why you end up with the later pirates just kind of being like soccer hooligans almost. From the
One thing I'll add,
go ahead.
add in while you're chatting about this. So, and we'll get to the starter boxes later. But don't be concerned about feeling constrained to one of these, because a lot of these sculpts, while there's enough variety in the range, some of them will be shared. So, like a European sailor's box would be just as usable by the French as it would be by the English. And so you don't need to stress out about painting them one way and then not having it work for another faction.
Yeah, the French militia models right now are French militia, veteran, freebooters. I mean, they're going to pull all kinds of duty, I'm sure, by the time their run is up. On to the No Peace factions, which is the first expansion to Blood and Plunder. It didn't shift the timeline. It just kind of opened up the scope of the game a little bit. So that book added the Dutch nationality, who are the preeminent sailors in the game. If you put them on a ship, they are at home. They're good shots with their musketry. They're good with their artillery. Just about every one of their models can load a cannon or sail a boat or do both. They're still useful on land. They're a little bit more average on land. So if you do find yourself playing them on land, it's not a problem. It's just if you find yourself playing them at sea, you're going to have a good time. The natives are the opposite of that. They're restricted on how large of a boat they can take because they're Native Americans and they didn't really build frigates. But on land, they are the hit and run army. Currently in the game, before we get Raise the Black, they are carrying a lot of bows and arrows. With Raise the Black, they're going to move into using muskets a bit more often. They're probably the least beginner friendly of all the forces. If you can play them well, they're terrifying. If you can't play them well, you're going to have a really tough uphill climb. Then you have all of the European factions that I think they call tertiary powers or something like that in the game. And these are not big enough to get their own nationality, but important enough to get their own faction. So you have things like the Scottish, who settled in the Carolina colonies, Brandenburg militia, or Brandenburg privateers, which are sort of like early Germans. Those factions rely on the European soldiers and European sailors, who have pretty average stats. They're a bit better than normal. Like, their shooting is very good. The European sailors are very good shots, but they're mostly relying on their faction rules for variety. But again, if you get started in any one of these factions, chances are if you pick up like another unit, another faction, it's going to completely change the way that you play with your army. It's a very flexible system, and I'm not jumping into 100 different sub-faction options and how they all play and interact.
So let's talk about what you buy. So we've talked about like picking something that interests you in terms of a faction, starter box do's and don'ts. Okay. The starter boxes that are great to pick up would be any of the national sets. So that would be the French starter box, the English starter box, the Dutch starter box, the Spanish starter box. Those are all great. If you're still working off the base book, you would want to stick with French, English, or Spanish. If you're going in for purchasing the expansion book, No Peace Behind the Line, then Dutch is a fun investment. I picked them because they were unique, and I like the Dutch flag because I like orange. So that's really the only reason I decided to put in such a substantial investment of them. The unaligned starter box has a lot of generic options that will let you kind of fill in the blank for a number of different possible factions. Tyler, go ahead.
Actually,
The unaligned are in the core book. The unaligned starter box comes with
The pirate stuff is the pirate guys, right?
It's a mixture. You get some English models, you get English freebooters, French flibustier. I think you get Spanish sailors.
I think they get Mariners.
Yeah, you get Marineros
okay.
from Spain, and you get the Forlorn Hope or Enfant Perdu, depending on how you want to field them.
But all of those
which
are really useful units.
Sporting party.
Like all of those are units you would use.
Yes, yeah, you will use all of those. I think the one that you were thinking of is the Pirates and Privateers box that came out with No Peace Beyond.
We'll talk about that in a second.
Yep, we'll get there.
If you're really into the native faction, the native box is also a perfect starter. And I would point this out about the starters if you're looking at purchasing stuff, which is, in my experience with a lot of other games, if you purchase their starter box, it's very much a gateway drug, and you're given just enough that you can barely play a game, but you can't really customize the list at all, and in some cases you can't even feel the full force. With the boxes these guys have put together at the price point they have them, you are getting a full army if you're playing 100-point games, which as a beginner player is generally what you're going to be able to put together. But
And up till now, that's also the level we run tournaments at, is 100 points.
For sure.
And before I got involved in all this, I bought a Dutch force, and I was trying to put 100 points together out of it. I could not use all the models that came in the starter box. I had to cut out a unit.
Right. So there's a lot of variety in what you can play, and you get to experiment with a lot of stuff. What you'll find, as we found, is you're going to enjoy the game so much, you're going to be like, oh, I really want to run this unit. I want to run this unit, and you can easily supplement it with a little pack here, pack there, and it doesn't require this enormous, Games Workshop style investment of funds. So it's a very, very affordable for us as a hobby kind of edition, if you're looking to get into this. So our picks for the ones to buy would be the national sets, French, Spanish, English, Dutch, the unaligned box, or the natives box. And I'll turn it over to Glenn or Tyler to talk about the boxes we don't recommend for beginners.
I'll take it. Although first I feel like we do need to point out the Dutch and the natives. The Dutch have already been mentioned, but the natives are also in No Peace Beyond the Lines. They are the expansion book faction. They're not
Correct.
in the original rulebook. So don't. I'm not saying these sets aren't excellent values. They are amazing values. They're not good starters for beginners. The European Militia is a good starter, maybe if you want to do one of the weird European factions like Scottish or the Swedes or something. But aside from that, they are soldiers. You get soldiers, you get cavalry, and you get
Artillery.
an artillery crew and gun piece and one artillery piece. Those are excellent additions for if you are adding to your force and you want to add some professional soldiers with guns. If you want to get cavalry, it actually comes with 4 cavalrymen or militia cavalry and 1 mounted commander, which they're sculpted in such a way that they're not necessarily a commander. You can just paint them up the same as the regular cavalry and have a 5-man unit. So the box itself is a great value if you add up all the parts and then look at the box price. It saves you, I think, $8 or $9, but it's not good for a starter just because it's hard to get a force built out of what's in that box.
It's definitely meant to be added to both of these boxes, because the one that you're about to mention, they're both meant to be added to an existing starter,
forces,
I think.
Yeah. Yes. And that brings us to the deceptively named Pirates and Privateers box. Everybody thinks pirates, I'm going to grab this box. That is the one that, again, this is an excellent box if you are expanding a force. It comes with 8 regular European sailors, 8 European sailors with muskets, 4 sailors with upgraded weapons, and what's the other 4?
4 artillery, but no gun.
4 more gun crew, and a reformato, I think, as
Yes.
your commander.
So here's a question I'll ask of the two of you guys. Let's say I'm a beginning player and I want to play a pirate list. Okay. What is the best starter box for me to get of the ones that we've mentioned that are already out?
If you really want to just play pirates and you're not going to be swayed into playing any kind of privateers, unaligned is probably the best way to go because they are the typical pirate faction.
I feel like I would also throw in, if you want to play a more elite pirate faction, you could also go for the French box. Because it's flibustiers, buccaneers, you can use the militia as veteran freebooters, and then some random sailors.
Okay.
Anyways, Pirates and Privateers, another great investment, especially if you have your force and you decide that you want to make a big investment and buy something crazy like a flute or a galleon. Suddenly you need a lot of guys on that boat to man all the guns, to help sail the ship, etc. If you plunk 25 guys onto a galleon, I guarantee you won't even fill the forecastle, and it's going to look kind of sad. So you just need more crew to fill it out and make sure that everything can operate. That's when you're looking at buying the Pirates and Privateers box and just enlarging your force that way.
I'll also say that so we're recording this prior to the Kickstarter completing for Raise the Black. That should be delivered to backers within a year. So if you're listening to this podcast far on down the road, it's possible that there are plastic options that have posable figures and alternating weapons and things like that.
Well, I think we should actually talk about that right now.
Sure.
Yeah, because there is a way to get into this game, probably with about 2 of those plastic boxes. It will give you a bigger army than you get out of the starter for about the same cost.
Yeah, the only problem is that if you're getting on the Kickstarter, you'd be waiting a while for it, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's still an amazing purchase.
So for the price of 2 of these metal box sets, you'd be buying the Kickstarter, which comes with 24 sailors, 2 captains, 2 boats, 2 card decks, dice, a rule book. Essentially, it's everything.
Yeah.
If you and your
2D
friend
terrain.
yeah, some terrain. If you and a friend want to get in, instead of each of you buying one of these metal boxes that we've just been discussing, you can split the cost of the starter set and get a ship each, plus enough guys to crew it and have small battles. And then if you want to split an additional box, which are $25 each, I think that's what they're going to retail for.
Yeah.
They'll each have 12 models in it, so you can either split the models in it or each buy your own box, whatever you want to do. So far, they've added militia. There's a sailor's box, a soldier's box. We're expecting Native Americans to get unlocked like any minute now. And we're hoping for cavalry, but
Fingers crossed. Yeah.
But yeah, that'll be a super cheap and efficient way to get into this game. Because believe it or not, the plastics actually make everything cheaper for the player.
Yeah, because they actually pass on the savings to us, which is something that not all companies do. So good on Firelock.
Yep.
So Tyler, I'll throw this question to you before we talk about list building. As the man who probably owns more boats than me and Glenn combined, do I need a boat to play this game as a
Tom,
beginner?
I'm shocked.
Well, are we pulling like the Bart Roberts and Pardal and counting all the canoes I own? Because in that case,
Yes.
I definitely have you all beat.
I don't know, Tyler.
I was counting
Closing in.
canoes. I was counting canoes.
Closing in.
All right. So, do you need a boat? No. You can play 1/3 of the game without a ship. The game is perfectly playable on land. Most players that I have met seem to prefer playing on land, and everyone seems more comfortable with that. Everyone's coming from Warhammer or Bolt Action or any of the other games where you don't have to worry about sailing a boat and your models ending up underwater. However, I do recommend getting a boat. Models are gorgeous. They look really cool. I have some of mine just hanging out on shelves because I'm a big nerd and I like having ships in my living room. But you can do amphibious games and you can do just straight up sea battles with your friends using the ships. Good sized, I assume your next question is going to be what size boat do we need? A good sized ship would be to grab probably something like the sloop. That's most people's go-to boat is the sloop. A couple lunatics will go for a Tartana, which is a little bit smaller, so it's going to fit your starter box better. The Brigantine is another really good all-around ship. It's a little bit bigger than the sloop. The only issue with that is you might want to pick up one of the extra, not the starter box, but like the extra blister of 4 more sailors or 4 more artillery crew, just so that you can run a ship that has 3 decks on it. So good starter boats, sloop number 1, Brigantine number 2, Tartana if you just want to be weird, but it is a really pretty boat.
Or you could go for Bark if you just want to try the smallest boat.
Yeah, and the Bark is, the smallest thing that is still technically a ship.
And I'm going to be honest, when I started painting boats, I was terrified, and I did the Bark first, just because it was the smallest ship, and if I messed it up, it wouldn't be the costliest thing to replace. And that really helped me get over the fear of messing up a ship. So it's not a bad starting point, and a starter box crew is more than enough to keep it underway in a small naval game, like 150 points.
All right, so go ahead.
I was going to say, you're almost running out of space on the Bark in Tartana.
Yeah, you
because
are.
you can only fit 4 units on it. So
Same with
you
the
use
sloop.
everything in the starter box. Yeah, same with the sloop. They're all size 2. So
Just the sloop can physically fit more models.
all the models.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so we've talked about what you need. We've talked about what forces are available. We've talked about what boxes you buy, and we've talked about boats. But before I play my first game, I have to make a list. So, Glenn, let's have you take the lead on that and talk about what Force Builder is and what kind of things you do when you think about what kind of a list you want to build.
Oh man, you're asking the math hammer guy.
That's right.
Well, firstly, I'd like to start out with some real math, real world math, which is Firelock, in another amazing move that proves that they just love their customers over everything else, has a free force builder that has all the units from all the books so far and units that aren't even in books yet. Because if they're trying something out, they'll throw it up there so players can use it. So if you go to, I just do Google searches, or at this point I've bookmarked it. Just Google Blood and Plunder Force Builder, and it'll say, like, what is the link?
The link is actually forcebuilder.bloodandplunder.com.
See, it's
Thank
easy.
you right there. Yep.
See, this is the power of quick links. They just made me lazy.
There you go.
Technology's rotting your brain.
It really is. So if you go into Force Builder, you open it up, and the first thing you do is you pick a nation, because the nations are how they organize the subfactions. So let's say you want to pick Spain. It'll come up with a bunch of options. You can, at that point, either pick that you want to use a special character, which will help limit down which forces they can be in. And I say special character, I should say named commander. Because you have 2 types of commander, essentially. You have named commanders, people like Henry Morgan or Francisco de Peralta or Lola Ney, famous pirates, or buccaneers, or gentlemen of fortune, whatever title you'd like to use. And you can choose them, which they often limit which factions you can use. Or you can choose a no-name commander, in which case they come with 3 flavors: untested, experienced, and seasoned. And then if you select them, it'll possibly limit your factions down. But you choose a faction or a commander, then you have to choose the opposite thing. And once you have that, you can start adding units to your force. You'll have a set of core units and support units. And in most forces, you need 2 core units for every support unit you choose. From there, if you scroll down, you can add boats to your force, or ships. We do designate between boats and ships. You can also add artillery, either to put guns on your ships, or you can add characters. And this is the confusing part. Characters are more like upgrades for individual units. So if you want to give a sharpshooter to your freebooters, that is a character upgrade, and he gets put into that unit. And each one has their own special rules that they do. There's exciting things, like the sharpshooter obviously makes you guys better at sailing. Grizzled veteran usually makes you guys braver. Son of Neptune, really good sailor. And then you got interesting ones like spy, ship's pilot, local guide, spiritual leader. And they all just contribute their own little tweaks to your force rules.
It adds a lot of flavor to the game, I would say.
It really does.
So let me ask you the non-math hammer question and say briefly.
Hang on.
Go ahead,
Tyler. Glenn was right about the adding a character to your units will replace one of the men in your unit. So if you add, say, a grizzled veteran to a unit of freebooters, one of your freebooters has just become a grizzled veteran.
Right. So
exception to that, because we see it a lot on the Facebook page. Pretty much, if a character costs more than 5 points, sorry. Right, so the Son of Neptune, words are hard today. Captured merchant, spy, the pilot, local guide, and the spiritual leader. Those 5 characters are added to your unit. So there is a specific model for the spy. It's a lady with a fan. You can buy her from Firelock, or you can grab another model. When you add them to your unit, they actually do increase it by +1. They're not a replacement effect.
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's
I'm
something
sure
that trips people up a lot when they're building their lists, because they're like, wait, why did I end up with 21 models when I have 4 units of 5 guys?
And you will notice that in your force builder, when you add the character, it'll either change the model count or it will not.
Okay. Okay. So it does it.
Yep, it already figures it in. Speaking of strike points, they're calculated by quarters of your force leaving. If you're a beginner and you're making lists, this is part of the math hammery thing. You really want to try and make sure that you get at least groups of 4 models. If you don't, it's fine. It's not going to destroy anything. But groups of 4 helps your models stick around later on the battlefield.
So let me ask this question of Glenn and Tyler, because you can help me just be better at making lists in general. So talking to our beginners, okay. If a beginner is making a list, let's say he's going to his first event being held at a game store, and he's going to get to play, a couple of games with his friends. What are 2 things that the beginners should think about as they're deciding what to take or how to build their list? We'll start with Tyler.
And do you want to? Oh, okay. I was going to offer for Glenn to start. Glenn already covered the strike points. So you kind of want a force that's divisible by 4 or as close as possible. For example, having 24 models, that means that you take a strike at every 6. Having 25 models or 27 models doesn't do you much good. It would be better if you either just stopped at 24 or you tried somehow to bump your way up to 28 for the purpose of strike points. Obviously, sometimes you end up with 25 models.
I would say the caveat there is it's better to run over by 1 than be short by 1.
Yeah, always try and squeeze the extra guy in. The second thing that I would suggest is obviously try to have a plan. Don't get suckered into fielding all of the biggest and best units. Having a really sizable core of militia, like 8 militia in one of the 100-point tournaments, is usually pretty good. That's a unit that's going to soak up a lot of shooting. They tend to stick around for a while. They're not going to scurry off the board whenever they start taking casualties. They will shield your captain if you choose to put your commander there. And they're going to give you, 8 militia. That's 24 points on 8 models. So it's going to get you up there in your strike point numbers. If you have 8 militia and then 4 freebooters and 4 trying to think what the English boarding party, Forlorn Hope. You have 4 each of those. You're looking at 16 models, and you're probably still sub 100 points on that list.
Okay. So Tyler's advice is groups of 4 for units and have a plan. And you guys talked about strike points. Glenn, do you have anything else you want to add?
Also note that when we say groups of 4, we don't mean like it has to be like 4 Milicianos and then 4 Marineros. Like it could be 5 and 3 if that's how you want to run it. Just groups of 4 in model totals.
Yeah, I would definitely rather have like 4 units of 6 than necessarily having 6 units of 4.
Yeah. Total number of units is something to look at as well. So ignoring my previous comment about the 4s or strike points as one of my things, I'm going to say number of units. Depending on the size of game, you're not going to be able to manage to get many large units in there. In the 100-point forces I've done for tournaments, I've only ever used 3 or 4 units in a 100-point force. I tried ones that had 5 and 6 in smaller games, and they're talking like really tiny units. They just don't stick around. They don't have the stopping power. They don't have the effect. You really kind of want to go with slightly bulkier units that can take a couple of hits, that can give out a bit of trouble for themselves. make a good account of themselves, as you might say. So yeah, don't go crazy trying to squeeze a ton of core units in just so you can get a couple of good supports. At that point, you might want to make another list or play a larger game if you're not in a tournament.
Yeah, that's where the factions come in, because
Yep.
some stuff will be support in one faction, and if you just switch from like English Buccaneers to English Caribbean Militia, it's going to switch what you have in the support slot and what you have in the core slot.
And that can change even between like English Caribbean Militia and English North American Militia.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So even similar forces can vary wildly.
So one parting list building thing I'll give as an advice piece for new players is that in my experience, list building won't cover poor play. So I still think that this game is pretty good in terms of its rule set, where making smart tactical choices will still bear out in terms of the game. Like, I don't think there's any big Death Star list you can take, and there's no one faction I would point to as like, oh, this is really overpowered or whatever. Everything has its drawbacks. They really did a good job of balancing these things. So the game is very balanced. So don't feel like you have to take a particular faction to win, and don't feel like you have to be this master list builder. You can still build bad lists, and they can hurt you if you are playing competitively. But there's a way to make most things work, I would say.
Yeah, agreed. There are some lists that are a little worse. Like you might not want to take logwood cutters to a tournament,
but they're
just they're fun to play.
Priority.
They're fun to play, but if you're aiming for top spot, they might be a limiter.
This will make Mike Tunez cringe, but the game is balanced so well that the biggest controversy, I think, in the game in terms of unit balance is whether or not a particular unit comes with one pistol or a pistol in each hand. And that's probably the biggest sticking point between the freebooter and the French flibustier units. The players are just like, well, this doesn't seem quite fair. And it's very minor when you get into gameplay.
Yeah, the game is
balanced. Games where I haven't noticed. Yeah.
The game's balanced when even the gamers are running out of things to complain about.
Sure.
Gamers always have something to complain about. It's always. That's who we are.
Yep. And
when we're quibbling over pistols, it's a small thing.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
A final point that I was going to make was many factions, many units in general, but also many factions allow a unit to be upgraded from, let's say, inexperienced to trained or trained to veteran, or even downgraded from trained to inexperienced, etc. As a beginner, don't worry about that. A lot of that is kind of specialized tweaking in my experience. I've seen a lot of people like get units and immediately upgrade all of their units as high as they can go. Each of those upgrades costs a point, and you're cutting down your model count. You're cutting down a lot of stuff. Try playing the units the way they come and see how that works. Because a lot of times that inexperienced unit that's super cheap, not as cheap when you upgrade them to trained, and they may not pull their weight when you do that.
I'm looking at you, French militia.
No, actually, that's one of the few I would say. Give them bayonets and trained and send them.
Oh
that way.
Yeah, you got to put them up to trained, but it's like
Milicianos,
most pricey unit of the militia.
But like Spanish Milicianos, who I'm staring at right now, don't bother. Just run on inexperienced. They're practically the stormtroopers of this game.
They are who they say they are. Just believe them. Believe someone when they tell you who they are. So Tyler, just talk about what people can do in terms of like reaching out to find a community. Talk about like who the quartermasters are, how you can get them.
Yeah. So the first thing to do is to go to the Facebook group that they have set up. It's fan run. I know that they did bring in folks from the company to kind of help oversee things, but it's on Facebook, big long name, Blood and Plunder, buccaneering across the Spanish Main. If you search Blood and Plunder on Facebook, it'll probably come up. Find that. That is the community group. Ask if there are people in your area where they're playing and so on. If you're a little bit sketchy about, saying that you live in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, or wherever you happen to reside on a big social media site, you're going to want to go to your local game store, and you might need to set up your own gaming community if you can't find one. People that you want to look for are quartermasters. It is a program that Firelock runs. They're kind of the street team. Firelock gives them resources and some kickbacks so that they can try and help promote the game for Firelock and get the game into stores and bring people together. So I think all three of us here on the podcast, we all quartermaster in our respective locales. Try and find someone like that. Can't find someone like that, reach out to Firelock. You might be someone like that. The first thing to do would be to definitely check the Facebook, ask around in your local store, and you can always reach out to Firelock. I know that if you send an email to their customer service and say, hey, what stores, I live in this area, are there any stores that stock your stuff? I'm sure they would be happy to let you know. They're a friendly group of people.
I would also say that the Facebook page is super friendly and it's very active. So you'll get a response very quickly if you ask a question.
There are literally people playing I've seen from all over the world. And when we do our paint nights, we have people check in from all across the United States. But I know that some people from like Poland were trying to listen. So it's all about, anytime you get on there and put stuff up, somebody will probably be online to help you.
I'll just kind of give a shout out for our respective regions, because if you want to reach out to us, we may know somebody in the area. I'm trying to get things started in the Hudson Valley and in New England, but I'm based mostly in Southern New England. So I'm based in Western Connecticut, but I travel regularly to stores along the Hudson River and Route 87 in New York. And I'll travel as far south as New York City. And I think the closest Firelock retailer to me is in Brooklyn. But I'm working to get it into a couple of other stores. There's Mythicos in New Jersey. They're great, and they're opening a new location that's even closer to me, so it's only about 45 minutes to an hour away, which is exciting. And there's Kerwan's and Catskill up in upstate New York. But I think COVID put a damper on all of our quartermastering plans. But I'm hopeful that by the time this is being listened to regularly, maybe a couple of months from now, that's kind of on its way down, and we can start meeting for gaming and demos and stuff in person with more regularity. And Glenn and Tyler, just briefly kind of sound off on like the area you are.
Go ahead,
Glenn.
All right, fine. So I live near Westminster, Maryland. But being a farmer living out in the country, I'm used to traveling for everything I do. So I have been in contact with game stores all the way from Western Maryland out towards the other side of Baltimore, and as far south as the DC area. So I'm trying to kind of cover Central and Western Maryland. So if you play anywhere in those, whether it's Critical Hit in Abingdon, I'm just getting in touch with those guys. We have Games and Stuff in Glen Burnie. We've got Gamer Core in Ellicott City. I know a group is trying to get started there. There was some interest out in Hagerstown with Neverland Games. There's also some interest in Frederick. And I was trying to talk to the guys over at... Sorry, I'm trying to pull all these gaming companies out of my brain.
Save.
Nope. Nope. I used to go to the store all the time. Brainstorm Comics and Gaming. Brain. There we go. And I know there's other
connection.
Yes. And I know there's other retailers in Maryland I just haven't even had a chance to get over to because there's so many. I think Captain Chuck's over on the other side of Baltimore, like in the Dundalk area.
If a guy named Captain Chuck doesn't support a pirate game,
Right?
it's gonna look at him. Yeah, it's a tragedy.
And then I think there's also Third Eye Comics down towards Annapolis, I believe, also stocks Firelock. So,
and Tyler, where are you at?
I am in southern and central Pennsylvania, so I play primarily in the Lancaster area. The store Owl Central is the local Firelock retailer. It's pretty much, I think, right now your main retailer in Pennsylvania. There might be some stuff up in the Northeast, like around the Great Lakes. I play out of Owl Central. And, anywhere in the Lancaster surround, if you're trying to get a community together, if you play in that area, we've got, I share some of the border, kind of like the border reavers between Glenn and myself along the Pennsylvania and Maryland line. Who also play there, Owl. The other thing that I do, being in Lancaster and, the Pennsylvania, Lancaster, Philly, puts me right in the heartland of all the East Coast HMGS gaming. So that is the other thing I would recommend if you're looking to find people who play. If you show up to the HMGS events, whether that's Cold Wars, Historicon, Fall In, you show up to one of those, Firelock is represented there every year since I think they've started.
And one or several of us.
That's where all of us got
will
started.
likely be running a tournament, or because I expect to be running more Firelock events at these conventions. Because now that I've done it with Mitch, it's a little more clear. And you guys have enough terrain with our powers combined. I think we got enough to run.
And we even had quartermasters coming down from Upper New York. Sean Martin and his crew were coming down to run events. Yeah,
absolutely.
I think that was the last hurrah right before COVID took everything down.
Yeah, we run. I've been roped into running the demo table before because Firelock's based out of Florida and they're scared of the cold. So if it gets below about 70, if it gets below 70 degrees, they don't move.
It's one of my favorite things to do.
They just lay down and die.
People from Florida, where they're like, oh no, it's 65 degrees. It's a new ice age.
Yeah. They call it Cold Wars for a reason.
That's right.
I've run the demo tables there. Other times I've put on large event games, just meant like big free-for-alls, boat games, things like that. So there will always be something to do, whether you just want a one-off game, you want to run a tournament, or just find us in the convention hall and ask for a demo. If we don't rope you into a tournament, we'll at least give you a demo.
Yeah, and Mitch has got 4 armies. I'll have 3 by the time we get our next con on, I think.
And that goes for all. I was going to say, we're talking Blood and Plunder here, but that goes for all Firelock products because I know
we can play anything.
We'll have, if you find us, we've probably got demos. Even if we're not at the vendor booth, we'll probably have stuff near the tournament area for demos of Oak and Iron, Blood and Valor, Blood and Plunder. Scurvy Dice might be hanging around.
I've got a copy.
Exactly. So if you're interested in any kind of Firelock product, we've probably got it.
So I'll close with just the kind of other resources part. Then I'll say, Glenn, give a plug for the paint, and then Tyler, you can just give a final talk about the Kickstarter, which will be relevant once this comes out, but you'll probably still be able to do late backing for a while after we release this recording. So if you're curious about rigs, how to play videos, things like that, Firelock has a lot of links to stuff on their site. So does the Blood and Plunder Facebook page.
Check Firelock's YouTube channel.
Yes, because their YouTube channel gives you a pretty good idea of how the play works. And the other plug that we'll give is for Joe Forrester and his blog, Blood and Pigment, which has a ton of resources for new gamers. And it, along with a lot of other sites like it, will talk to you about how to do rigging for ships, painting guides for different things. So there's a pretty rich community here. And if you're just getting involved and you're just listening to us, thank you for listening to us, because we enjoy doing this together. I like talking to these guys. And you could also talk to us over video chat if you're on every other Friday night. So Glenn, just talk about what that is.
Yep. We do a community event. We started it because of COVID, but I think we're probably going to continue it past COVID. Called No Paint Beyond the Lines. Punny title, kind of based off of the first expansion book. But what we do is we get together on a Google call. Usually starts 8 p.m. Eastern. Theoretically, it runs till midnight, but I don't think I've gotten off the call before 2 a.m. much recently, ever. We tend to go pretty late. The guys in California will show up later because it's after dinner time.
Yeah,
So,
I go pretty late. I'm up so late.
Tom's usually out by about 10:30, so you got to get him while the getting's good.
It's not even a school night, and we can't get him up.
I know. No, I'm so old and full of sagely wisdom that I just pass out at around 10 o'clock. Just can't do it. And I feel bad because Joe Forrester is on the West Coast and he keeps trying to get in, and I'm asleep and he can't get in. So no, I'm sorry. I failed you, Joe.
Anyways, so come to that. And again, this is where you can get the Facebook community live. Instead of putting up a picture on Facebook and waiting for the comments, you can literally just shove the model in front of the camera and say, "Look, guys, I think I screwed up the wash. How do I fix this?"
We'll tell you.
Whatever question. You can listen to me try to rig a ship for 4 hours.
Swear like a sailor. The best thing about No Paint is you have all of us, big celebrities that we are not. But Joe almost always comes and joins in from Blood and Pigment. And Mike is there more often than not. So if you have a rules question, you can literally ask the guy who wrote the rules. And
he'll just pop on every once in a while.
And sometimes you might even meet Mitch Reed. And we apologize for that.
That's a real treat, though. It's the best.
It is.
I love when he keeps the camera off because of that one time we made fun of how terrifying it was when his camera was on. But yeah, so we've been holding it every week during November of 2020 during October of 2020, excuse me, because of the upcoming Kickstarter. But we will generally be holding paint nights every other week. So you'll see a post on Facebook, you'll see a post on our Facebook page, and you'll also see a cross post to a bunch of other community pages like Buccaneering Across the Spectrum, Pirate Wargaming, and stuff like that. So you'll see it probably the Monday usually before, if I think to do it while I'm in school and I can dodge the filters, because they seem to approve of piracy. So I'm going to keep going with that as long as I can. And speaking of approval of piracy, Tyler, just explain the Kickstarter for those of you that are pledging late or those of you that are still looking to put down money on a starter. Just explain when it ends and what's going on.
Oh, you're going to ask me the ending date. Now I got to scroll up.
November
4th.
Day after elections.
I already gave him a hard time about that.
Yeah. So the Kickstarter is ending November 4th, meaning that probably by the time the majority of you are hearing this, you will be on late pledges, which we don't know what that looks like yet. But so far, Firelock has done some kind of late pledge offer. Every Kickstarter that they've ever done, I wouldn't expect this one to be any different. The headlining thing of this Kickstarter is the new 2-player starter box, which we spoke about. Get in through the Kickstarter. It is a crazy $119. So $120. You're going to pick up 24 plastic sailors. You're going to get a Blackbeard model, Robert Maynard model, and you're going to pick up 2 of the new sloops, which can also be rigged as either a Balandra sloop or the Bermuda sloop.
And keep in mind, when we say sloop, we're talking about a 1-foot-long ship.
These are about the size of, a 40K Baneblade.
Yeah.
They're big. You're going to pick up 2 activation decks. You're going to get unit and ship cards for the stuff that comes in the box. You get a mini rule book that covers all of the core rules and then has all of the rules for the stuff that you need to be able to play with the sailors and captains that come in there. And mat, gauges, you're gonna have marker tokens, dice. They even throw a ruler in there for you. Even if you don't have someone to split this with, just 24 sailors and a captain and 2 ships, you will use that at some point. Use at least one of the ships. And they've also got, the box of plunder, which is going to it's a bunch of community goodies that we're working on unlocking, and it goes up from there. You can add additional boxes, militia, soldiers. Starters are always a great time to get into the game. This Kickstarter in particular is an amazing time to get into the game.
I'm honestly buying an extra one of the starter boxes just to paint up and literally just have my demo set up for when I go to different stores to introduce people to the game.
No, in 12 years of gaming, I've never spent this much money on a game in a single shot, and I went for the full one.
Yeah,
because it's I don't have nearly as many models as you guys do, and this will completely fill out my collection to a large degree. Even though it's not getting delivered for a year, I have enough to play with now, and I've been paying attention and stuff like that. So grab it if you can.
Jump in it and get it. And the game really, plastic, them passing the savings on to us is awesome. I come from a GW background, so prices like this always put my jaw on the floor, but I can buy every one of the starter boxes, all of the nationality boxes, and a ship less than I think I've ever paid on a Games Workshop. So if you jump in on the Kickstarter, cool. If you get in later, there's still plenty of affordable ways to get into this game. If you're on the fence, I highly recommend jumping in on the paint night. We don't really care what you're painting. Just hang out with us.
Even if you're painting.
Yeah.
Or if you're painting at all. Yeah. Just come hang out with the community. Join us on the Facebook page if you'd like. Check out the YouTube videos that Firelock has done. Check out Joe's blog. If you're on the fence, it's an awesome game. It's an awesome company, and it's an awesome community of people to get into. So or buy in later.
That's a good note to end on. So I'll thank you guys for listening. We're going to try to mark this as one that people can listen to first if they're looking at our backlog of stuff. If you're somebody who's been a regular listener for us, then we apologize for being a little repetitive in parts, but we wanted to have a definitive episode we could consistently point to so that new players would get a one-stop shop for all the stuff that we want them to know before they get too deeply into the game, so that they get the stuff that they want to get. So hopefully we'll see you at No Paint Behind the Line, or we'll see you at a convention. And if you have any questions, stop by our Facebook page and ask. I think that's it, right?
Anything else? That's it.
I think we're good.
All right.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, or good day wherever you are in the world, and welcome to the next episode of No Dice, No Glory. Sponsored by our jobs that actually pay us money, we're coming to you not at all live from an abandoned arms factory deep under a mountain in West Virginia. We are proud to proffer to you the finest in wargaming coverage. Without any further ado, let's get this show on the road.